Part two of the video about baby mind. So we got to the point where I was talking about, we think that we're this chatterbox part of the mind, the conscious mind, the part of the mind that we're conscious of, let's say that. When in fact there's this other part of the mind, the baby mind, the subconscious mind, that is the thing that is aware of the conscious mind. So that's the first step. Possibly the next realization is that everything that appears to us, everything in your field of vision, all of the sensory inputs that you have, everything you hear, everything you see, everything you feel, is in fact appearing in that baby mind. It's that subconscious mind, aka the awareness, that is actually creating this story. You know, it doesn't take a deep scientific knowledge to understand that the way we observe the world is that certain amounts of sensory information, I mean, a huge amount of sensory information really, comes in through our eyes, through our ears, through our nostrils, through our skin, through all of our senses, our sense of balance, etc., etc., and is translated, converted into digital and chemical signals that goes into our brain, which is then converted into a story, a translation. Our brain actually works out a story to tell us about what's going on. I mean, for example, when I look across the room at the wall, I know that what's actually happening is subatomic particles called photons that were emitted by the sun about 8 minutes ago bounce off of the atoms that make up the wall, bounce in here, hit my eye, they're then translated into an electrical signal which goes through to part of my brain, the occipital lobe, which then converts that into a story about what I'm looking at. But I'm not actually seeing the wall directly. There's actually a photon that's bouncing, hitting my eye. My brain's translating that and telling me that there is something over there. But I'm not actually directly seeing, if that makes sense. The same with anything that I hear or anything that I touch. When I stomp my foot on the floor, what's actually happening is that the electrons in the atoms of my foot are kind of being repelled like two ends of a magnet from the electrons of the atoms of the floor, and my body, my brain, there's a signal going up my nerves which gets to my spine, gets into my brain, and is translated that I'm stomping my foot on something hard. But it's a story that my brain is telling me. But it's the subconscious mind, because you don't actually think, when that wall is seen or a car drives past, those things don't tend to get processed by the conscious mind unless they're particularly important or relevant to us at the moment. If the car that drives past is about to crash into me, my conscious mind will probably pay attention to that. Otherwise, all these things are just going on, and our baby mind is aware of them, but not really passing that information through to the conscious mind unless the thing that's happening, the event that's happening, is of particular relevance or importance to us right in that moment. But the point is, the baby mind is the thing that's aware, and it's just processing all of this data. And at some point you realize that the entire world around me, everything that I see, is being created in my mind, including that chatter monkey conscious mind. The thing that I thought was me is actually being created in this baby mind, along with everything else. Everything that appears in the world around me is actually a story that's being created on the fly inside of my subconscious mind. Now, if what I think of as me, when I look down at my body and I have these thoughts in my head, and all of those are appearing in my baby mind, and everything else and everyone else around me is also appearing in my baby mind, how are they different from each other? And you realize when you sit and think about this for a little while that, well, these are all the one thing. This is all my subconscious that's creating all of this. There's actually no difference between the idea of me, my mind and my body, and the idea of a person sitting across the room from me, or the wall, or the chair, or the car, or the tree. They're all just ideas being created in my subconscious. They're all equally conceptual. There's no importance or separation between the idea of me, the idea of the tree. They all appear in the baby mind equally. And this starts to get us to the idea that, well, it is all one. There is only one. One of the other doorways into this stuff is thinking about free will. People tend to struggle for some reason with the idea that we have no free will, but it's very, very simple. It's in fact incredibly difficult to make a coherent theory that we do have free will. When people try and do that, they struggle. But the theory for no free will is very, very simple. And the way I like to explain it is that, well, first of all, we should define free will. The definition of free will that we're talking about here is the ability to think and act outside of cause and effect. Otherwise, it's not really free. If your thoughts and your actions are just cause and effect, you're not free. You're just obeying your programming, or you're just reacting to what's happening around you, or a combination of the above. So, with that definition in mind, let's think about decisions. Decisions are really thoughts. Thoughts are properties of the brain. The brain is made of chemicals. Chemicals obey the laws of chemistry, which are cause and effect. So, therefore, every decision, every thought that we have is directly governed by cause and effect. Ergo, there is no free will. Now, it seems like a very simple, unassailable argument to me, but for some reason people fight and they struggle, and they tend to find it difficult to let go of this idea of free will. Mostly, I think, because they've been told all their lives that they have it, and that the idea that they don't have free will scares them for some reason. They think perhaps that there would be no morality without free will, or there would be no legal system without free will. But, neither of those things are true. There are many of us, myself included, who live our lives with the knowledge that we have no free will. Some philosophers or cognitive scientists even say that they know that free will is an illusion, but they often say that it's a necessary illusion. We have to feel like we have free will. That's just not true. Again, I and people that I know, many people that I know, have lived for years and years and years absolutely not under the illusion that we have free will, absolutely knowing that we don't have free will. And therefore, it's not a necessary illusion in our lives at all. And this is a really important thing. Sometimes people will say, well, what does it matter if we think we have free will or not? It's actually really, really important. The way I normally explain it is that most of the negative emotions and the problems that people have in life are due to the idea that they have free will. Guilt, anger, regret, anxiety, fear about what's going to happen tomorrow, what somebody might do to you, are all predicated on the idea that you or the people around you have free will. When you realise that that's just not true, what you'll find is all of those negative emotions will basically disappear over time, because they don't make any sense anymore if you remove the foundation of this idea of free will. So that's another doorway into non-duality. The last doorway I'll talk about briefly is again only takes a little bit of scientific understanding, basically high school level science. This is the idea that everything in the world around us, everything in the universe as far as we know, is made, or everything that's made of matter anyway, is made of atoms. And the idea that we have of ourselves as an individual entity, as a mind and a body, is due solely to the limitations of our senses. Okay, I look down here, I can see my legs, and it looks like there's an outline of where my legs stop and where the table that they're resting on begins, or the floor underneath them, etc. But I know that the version of events that my brain is telling me isn't necessarily an accurate version. If my eyes were powerful enough to see at an atomic level, I would actually see millions and millions of atoms every second of every day flowing off of my body and away from my body as cells deteriorate, as gases leave my lungs, etc. I would also see millions and millions of atoms every second of every day becoming part of my body from outside, from the food that I eat, from the air that I breathe, photons and other particles moving around in the atmosphere and becoming part of my body. So I'd have a very different picture of who and what I am if I saw this constant flow of atoms coming in and leaving my body constantly. And then if I could see even at a lower level than the atoms, if I could see it at a subatomic level, what we know from basic physics is that atoms aren't like an egg. They don't have a hard shell. They have a fuzzy boundary. The electrons that are in orbit around the nucleus of an atom don't orbit around them like planets orbit around the sun. They actually occupy a fuzzy probability around the nucleus. Physicists refer to it as a probability wave. Without going into detail about that, basically atoms, the outside of an atom is basically fuzzy. It doesn't have a hard shell. So again, if I could see at a subatomic level, and I looked down at my body and I looked at the floor and the air in between me and the chair and me and the table and me and the wall, I would see no hard boundary between my body and the air and the wall. It would just be this fuzziness of atoms joining into other atoms, joining into other atoms all the way across. And my idea of who and what I am would be dramatically different if we could see down at this level. So we shouldn't allow the limitations of our senses to determine our idea of who and what we are. We know enough to realize that this idea that I am somehow a separate body, mind entity to everything around me just doesn't hold up to investigation. And if I'm not separate, if there's no hard boundary between my body and the air and the wall, then where do I stop and where do I start? And if I'm not separate, then I must be the whole. It's kind of a binary thing, right? It's either or. Either I am separate to everything or I am not separate. And if I'm not separate, then I am everything. Hence, we say the only conclusion you can come to is that you are the universe, not a part of the universe. You are the universe. It's the only conclusion that you can come to when you realize that the separation that we perceive is an illusion. So that's non-duality in a nutshell from my perspective. I think all up, video 1 and video 2 is about 20 minutes. It's really no more complicated than that. There's a number of different doorways or entry points into it, as I said, the baby mind, the free will, the atomic level idea, the thought that everything that's appearing in your conscious mind is really, or appearing in your baby mind is being created. It's not real, it's a story that's being created moment by moment. It's a bit like a dream state. You know, you go to sleep and you have a dream and everything seems so real and you're in the dream and other people are in the dream and you're doing things in the dream and it seems so real, and then you wake up and you say, well, none of that was real, it just existed in my mind. My mind was creating that reality, that world. Well, the world that you see around you when you're awake is really no different. It's still all being created in your mind, has no more reality than the dream reality does. They're both created in your mind, by your mind. Anyway, I'll leave you with that.